Hello, one and all, and welcome to a back to school edition of Top Deck Thoughts. Wait, what? Okay, context here. Now, what happened was essentially what the original Top Deck Thoughts I was going to do was actually just talk about the current state of Kaldheim Standard, which, long story short, Kaldheim Standard is actually pretty healthy at the moment. Like, it's been actually really cool to see kind of like the decks that have been forming around a lot of experimental decks. There were definitely some standard meta decks and such, and they all variety realms of power level slash budget level, which is very nice to see. Now, I was going to talk about that, but then we kind of got an announcement that kind of caught us by surprise. On Thursday, last Thursday, as of this recording, they essentially announced, or at least a teaser of the upcoming standard set Strixhaven School of Mages. Now, for people who didn't know this teaser was coming, this kind of came out of left field kind of scenario. It seemed a little early to have spoilers for the set, since technically the set doesn't come out till mid to late April, to put into context. So, this is probably the earliest spoiler we got of this card, and it led to a lot of people speculating why we got the spoilers this early. Honestly, I'm not going to go into details on that one, but basically the speculation ranges from the realms of a way to compete against kind of like the game news that are coming from BlizzCon with the Hearthstone news and such. Some of it is even speculation that essentially it was a PR move to essentially help distinguish themselves from other very popular properties that are in the magical school genre that have very problematic offers writing for them. To even some doing the distinction of just saying that, well, maybe they did this just to essentially, since a leak was about to come out and they wanted to get ahead of the leak. So there were many speculations on this, so I'm not going to go into detail. If you want to get my logical guess of what happened, I think it could be a component of all of those to an extent, but I think the primary reason why they did the teaser was what I try to do is I do try to follow all the kind of like Magic the Gathering developers and stuff on Twitter and such, and other social mediums that they produce contents on. And from what I've been hearing, a lot of people are very in the development department are very excited about Strixhaven. They're really wanting to show stuff off. So a part of me thinks that it's a little bit of excitement on Watsy's part of just teasing the set and just getting the initial hype machine started. Was it a little too early? You can. It depends on who you ask, but it's definitely interesting to see what we got from this teaser. So, what do we got? So we got the initial premise of what Strixhaven School of Mages is. And what Strixhaven School of Mages is essentially, it's on a new plane, and what the plane does, essentially, it's essentially a giant college slash kind of like school administration area where it's split into 5 colleges. And the 5 colleges are each founded, as we stated in the article here, which you can find on the mothership, they're each founded by an elder dragon whose name each school bears. So, fair context here. Elder Dragons. Oh, and the classes are enemy color pairs, not ally color pairs, but hey, Elder Dragons, color pairs sound familiar? For those of you who play during Dragons of Tarkir, you're probably having a little bell ring. And yeah, to a basic extent, this is kind of, not informatics, of course, but it seems like we're getting the enemy color paired Dragons of Tarkir back to school edition, in a sense. So yeah, essentially we got 5 quote-unquote colleges, or clans if you want to make the Dragons Tarkir joke still, but essentially 5 colleges that each are essentially kind of like separate themselves into a basic realm of study, so to speak. So the first one they have is Lorehold, which they have their pretty much motto, which is leave no stone unturned. And this is the Boros color pairing college, and the basic premise of this one is that it's essentially archaeologists, like people, like essentially explorers trying to dig up ruins, dig up essentially history and such, and use that to their advantage. We'll get to the commands in a minute, but I just wanted to get through all the colleges just real quick. There's also Prismari, which is the Izzet college. Basically, this one is express yourself with the elements. This one is basically just feed our kids, essentially, with elementals. That's basic premise of this one. Very interesting to see what cards will come from this one. Then we have Quandets, which is essentially, the basic way I could say it is just essentially nature mathematicians from what it looks like. it's kind of like a druid slash also kind of like they focus heavily on the mathematics, like to the point that they made the joke that they essentially can recite pi backwards. So they're essentially the mathematicians of the college. Then we have Silvaquill, which is basically sharp style, sharper wit. These are basically the writers. Essentially, they have writing magic and such, and just they essentially have sharp wit, and they even have like little ink demons, which is kind of cute that we can see in the art here in a minute. And then the last one is Witherbroon, which is Get Your Hands Dirty is their model. And this is the one where many people are like, oh, this is what happens if Gagari is a college. And yeah, it kind of is. They do have their own distinction that this is essentially the Goth Bio. Actually, I think I remember. The Goth Bio Mages. But yeah, it's kind of basically Gagari. So yeah. And they have their own cycle cards. Well, cycle cards that we're going to talk about in a minute, which we're actually going to look at the spoilers real quick. Which in this case is they actually showed off, since this is kind of their take on Dragons of Tarkir, we actually get a return of a very popular cycle, which in this case is the Command Cycle. For those who didn't play during Tarkir and don't know about this cycle, contents here. Essentially, the Command Cycle is either an instant or sorcery spell of essentially in this case it's enemy color pairs, but the previous one in Dragons of Tarkir was ally color pair. And basically, it's a kind of a supercharged charm, in a sense, where it's a spell that essentially has 4 choices, mostly 4 choices, and you can choose 2 of them. So, for example, Lorehold command here, as we see here on the video. Actually, I think we can just let me actually zoom in on this with the one moment. Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll do it like that. Okay, so sorry, little post editing on this one, so we'll do it like this. There we go. I hope you can read the text. But essentially, so Lorehold command, which in my opinion, at least if we're talking standard, is probably the best of the bunch. If we're talking standard. Lorehold command is a 5 mana instant. Yes, that's a lot of mana. We'll get to it. But it has an instant that's choose 2. And choose 2 is either to create a free 2 red or white spirit creature token. Creatures you control get +1 and gain indestructible and haste until end of turn. Lorehold command deals free damage to any target. Then target player gains free life. I do kind of love the political aspect of that for commander. And then it also has a very interesting ability. You can sacrifice a permanent and then draw 2 cards. Okay, this is a really good command. Now, the reason why this is really good is because it's one of those commands that, due to the instant speed aspect of it, it's a very modular card that you can both play during your turn and your opponent's turn, and the abilities have all relevancy depending on whenever you cast it. Like, do you need a finisher? Well, just choose the first 2 where you get pretty much create a red and white spirit creature token and give all your creatures +1 and indestructible and haste and swing in. Do you need to get some card draw? Okay, sacrifice a permanent and draw 2 cards and maybe... Also, remember the way... Which is actually a really nifty thing about this card. Let's say you don't want to sacrifice a permanent. You could do something along the lines of seeing that how these type of cards go from top to bottom with how you choose, essentially. So it resolves the top theme. You can technically first essentially create the free 2 red and white spirit croachin red and white spirit creature token, and then sacrifice the token for card draw, which is actually really cool. Granted, 5 mana, draw 2 cards. Very expensive, but we never were in Boros, and card draw in Boros can be a little bit finicky at times. Then there's just also the factor that it is also a lightning hail, so if you need a lightning hail, it's really good. So I feel like in standard aggro decks, especially those that want to do like Boros aggro, they are actually going to like this card a lot. And also, this is a card that I do think has a chance for some commander play, because, like I said, there's a nice, element of politics you can do in here with the fact that target player gains free life and such, so maybe you don't need to gain life, but someone does. You can do a little dealing with that. And also it's just card draw in Boros, which Boros will take any card draw they can get, so Lorehold command, very nice. Also, for those who think this is too expensive, yes it is. I will say one rebuttal. If you do go into other colors of, let's say, the Mardu variety, with splashing a little bit of black, you could technically use the Demon Cleric we got from Kaldheim that makes all of your cards have foretell, which means all your commands now can have foretell. So you can foretell this command and make it cost 3 mana. So, something to keep in mind in the back of your head. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. Next up, we got Prismari Command, which is probably, if we're talking Eternal formats, probably the best of the bunch, but it's debatable. Anyway, Prismari Command is 1 blue and a red, instant, choose 2. This command deals 2 damage to any target, so shock. It also has target player draws 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. It also has target player creates a treasure token, or destroy target artifact, which in an Embercleave-like meta, that's actually a really nice module ability there. So, I do like this command, even for standard, to be honest, because mostly the potential ramp of the fact that you create the treasure token. Mostly with that, you can actually play this on turn 3, and then if you get a land, you could, in theory, be able to play a turn 4 Goldspan Dragon, which is a very popular card at the moment, so being able to get that out as early as possible is very nice, especially if you use this, and as well as using any of the other abilities you need at the moment. One other thing to keep in mind, drawing 2 cards and discard 2 cards, this can, in a roundabout way, be considered if your opponent's empty-handed, just mill your opponent for 2 because they draw their cards. If they don't have any mana to cast on instants, they have to discard the cards immediately, so something to keep in mind on that. But also, destroying target artifact is very nifty to have this on just a very good module spell, especially with very popular cards in the format like the Great Hinge / also Embercleave, and even a lot of people have been trying to do the Cosmos Elixir shenanigans, so you gotta keep that in mind. So there's a lot of very popular artifacts, even Mazemind Tome, so with that, I do think this card does have a chance to see a little bit of play, especially when you consider the factor that this can just be used as ramp to either on turn 3, get a 4-drop out if you don't get a land, or get a 5-drop out if you do get a land. So, something to keep in mind. Now, one thing I will say before I continue, because I forgot that I wanted to talk about this, keep in mind, this is analysis of these cards within the current standard format. We're going to get a whole new set when Strixhaven comes out. All those additional cards could pretty much change the meta really significantly, that the initial analysis that I'm giving here could be a little bit off, so keep that in mind. Like, for example, if they, for some reason, give us an instant spell that says counter target multicolored spell, then, well, you get my point. But, nevertheless, one of my personal favorite commands, which I think it's actually pretty good, Quandit's command. It's 1 green and a blue, just 3 mana for an instant, and has choose 2. Return target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Very relevant. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on up on target creature, aka 1 target creature. Or target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyards into their library. Okay, so why do I like this card a lot? Okay, first thing I like about this card a lot is, it, at least with current standard, it does feel like it fulfills a lot of roles. First of all, counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Remember, one of the more popular cards in the format are artifacts and enchantments. Artifacts in the realms of Embercleave, Great Hinge, and such, even Maul of the Skyclaves. And then also enchantments, we have the Saga cycle still going around, and the Saga cycle is very, very popular, like Binding the Old Gods, like one of the most popular removals in the format currently. We even have stuff like Banishing Light. I could go on. So, being able to have this as a way to counter your opponent's one very problematic thing and just get a second thing out of it, very nice. Also, returning target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. You could use this for tempo to bounce an opponent's thing, but you can also use this to bounce your own things, which you think at first glance not really that great until you realize it helps. It's kind of like a semi-protected from removal, and we also have cards like Orvar, where if we target our own fiend, we can create a token copy of it. So, let's say we're trying to protect our Planeswalker before it gets like Murderous Rider or such, or any popular Planeswalker removal at the moment. We play Quandit's commands. If Orvar is on the battlefield, we return our Planeswalker, and we get a token Planeswalker, which is pretty sweet in my opinion. Also, putting 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, that can be used as a combat trick, so don't deny that. And even the one that most people have been kind of like a little bit down on, the target player shuffles up the free target cards from the graveyard into the library. With the fact after that we still have escape cards in the meta as well as mill, that ability might become a lot more popular than you think at first glance. Like being able to shuffle an opponent's Crota back into the library and be like, no, you're not escaping with that. Or any other of their escape spells that they have. Or just even on your own graveyard, like being able to reduce the graveyard count to help combat against Sultai or even Dimir Mill. That's very good. Plus, also, keep in mind, if you played at least one or two copies of this and you played like your third copy, you could just shuffle your other two commands in and have this at the ready when you draw it again. So, yeah. I really like all the things that this card can do. I think it's very versatile. I do think it has a chance for standard play. Quote, my warning there where I'm saying I don't know yet. It depends on what cards are introduced in Strixhaven besides this cycle, so keep that in mind. And then we got the one where I like it, but I don't think it's amazing. Silver Quill Command. 2 white and a black for a sorcery. Keep in mind that. Target creature gets +3/+3 and gains flying until end of turn. Okay, that's nice. And then return target creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Target player draws a card and loses 1 life, and target opponent sacrifices a creature. Okay, quick thing real quick for people who don't know. Mana value is technically their new term for converted mana cost, aka CMC. They're just doing this so that essentially it helps provide more text on the cards and such, and they think it's a lot more easier for new players, which, honestly, it makes sense. I think this is a nice change, going from converted mana cost to mana value. I do think it will be a lot more easier for people to understand the concept of it, but remember, essentially, they're the same thing, it's just a different term. Just a different way of saying it, so to speak. So, as for the card itself, it's not bad, but I don't think it's amazing. Like, the fact that it's sorcery speed kind of hurts this card a lot, but all the abilities are really nice. Being able to give one of your aggro creatures evasiveness with +3/+3 and gain flying, that's really nice. Being able to return a target creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield is very nice, especially where in the meta where there's very powerful 2-drops. Like, if you need to, you could like return your Crota from your graveyard to the battlefield to just make your opponent force to discard, and then it will just do its sacrifice effect again and all that. That's really nice. And just being able to draw a card and lose a life, and this is target players, so you could use this as a very, very sneaky way to lethal the opponent if they're at 1 life. And also, target opponent sacrifices a creature. I don't know if this is going to replace stuff like, say, Soul Share in the format and such. Like, that's very popular at instant speed. This is sorcery speed, but still, having the ability to have the Edict effect on this is nice. So, I do think it will see standard play, but it is definitely, of all the cycle, kind of the least exciting, in my opinion. Though I will say the art on it is pretty cool. And then the last last card of this cycle, Witherbloom Command, which... This one... I'm going to have to talk about this one. Witherbloom Command, green and a black, so it's the cheapest command of the bunch. And it's a sorcery speed, which... But it says, choose 2. Target player mills 3 cards, and then you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, that's nice. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Okay. Target creature gets -3, -1 until end of turn. Okay. And then target opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Now, I was initially really down on this card when I analyzed it, but... Other than the fact that I'm like, yeah, Eternal Legacy players are definitely going to give this a shot. But after a lot of talking to a lot of popular kind of content creators and such, and even Time Smash MTG kind of brought his opinion on this, the card is actually a lot more better for standard than I took for granted at first stage. First of all, being able to destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, you don't really think that's great until you remember how many powerful kind of 2-drops of mana value 2 or less that we have in the format. We have stuff like Mazemind Tome. If it gets popular enough, we have Shadow Spear. We even have any of the really, really cheap sagas from Pharaohs, like essentially stuff like the Birth of Meletis and such. Granted, I don't think you're ever going to use it to destroy Birth of Meletis, but you kind of see what I'm saying. Plus, there is the aspect that we're going to have this set coming into standard and such, so maybe they have some powerful non-creature, non-land permanents with mana value 2 or less coming in, so this is a nice way to answer those. And then the target creature gets -3, -1. I kind of thought that was a big whoop until I realized that a lot of popular creatures that are of the 1 and 2 mana currently in Standard have 1 health. So just being able to use this to essentially take some very, very problematic creatures that are really hard to destroy because they can be protected themselves. Like, you can probably guess which ones I'm referring to. I'm having a brain fart on the name, but it's the free one that essentially you can discard a card and give it indestructible. That one specifically. So being able to use this to just essentially say, nope, gone, very nice. And the one aspect of the card that I really like is the first part. Target player mills free cards, and then you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can use this to mill an opponent if you need to, and you already have a land card in your graveyard, like say for example you cracked the Fabled Passage in Standard and such. So you can just mill your opponent if you think that would be the best beneficial and such, and then just essentially return a Fabled Passage. That's very nice. You could also do the aspect of this card where essentially you can mill yourself, which, yet again, we are in a format where escape is a very popular mechanic. There's a lot of incentives for self-milling and such, so being able to self-mill yourself, especially for reanimator-based strategies, and then just getting a land out of it, very nice, good use of resources. So I was initially really down on this card, but after more talking with people, I do think this card could secretly be the best if we're talking multi-formats. We definitely have to wait and see, but it's definitely an interesting card to keep in mind. Now, after that, essentially we're going to go back to this real quick because I do want to actually talk about a few things here. We did got revealed also what's going to be the showcase cards of the set, and what they basically are is the Mystical Archive or the Biblioplets. Or Biblioplets? I think I maybe butchered that pronunciation, but long story short, the basic premise of this, Strixhaven has a magical library, and the magical library has a combination of spells throughout the history of quote-unquote magic and such, and basically you can have a chance to get, well, not a chance, like it is one in every, I think the way they separate this, just for clarification, there's always going to be one of these quote-unquote mystical archive cards in each kind of like booster of Strixhaven. One in each set booster, or I think it's only one in each set booster, and 3 in the collector boosters. So, keep that in mind. So what are the mystical archive cards? For those of you who are very familiar with the time-shifted cards from Time Spiral, you kind of get the basic premise of this. So, the basic premise of this is it's cards throughout Magic's history with this new alternate art to make it look like, kind of like arcane text from a book and such. Basic premise is that. And for clarifications, not all the cards in the Mystical Archive will be standard legal. They will be legal within the formats that they are legalized in. And you're going to see why I mention that once we get to the cards that have been shown off. Like, for example, Demonic Tutor. No, Demonic Tutor is not standard legal. Unless they, for some reason, be like, oh, hey, we're reprinting Demonic Tutor in Strixhaven. No. It's only in the Mystical Archive, and it's only legal in the formats that Demonic Tutor is legal in. So just keep that in mind. But, as we can see here, also Opt is in this, and Opt is standard legal, so let's say if you get an Opt, you can play this Opt within your standard. So keep that in mind. But essentially, they are alternate art of very popular Magic the Gathering spells throughout history, like we had Demonic Tutor, Opt shown off, and we have Sword of Plowshares, which is just very gorgeous art. So, really cool that they're actually doing this, just as a nice additional incentive. Also, one thing to keep in mind, if you are playing this in Draft, including on Arena, you can play with these cards within your draft pool, which is going to, depending on the whole cycle of spells, is definitely going to put an interesting new curve to the drafting format in Strixhaven. It'll be very fascinating to both look at this Mystical Archive set, as well as the full Strixhaven set when it gets fully spoiled, and kind of like consider how they will impact drafting of the set. It's definitely going to be very fascinating. Oh, and one more thing. Technically, yes, some of these cards will be historic legal, and some of these will be banned in historic, or quote-unquote, they're going to be replaced. So, Demonic Tutor, not legal in historic. Sword of the Plowshares, even though many people like myself are still kind of like, is also banned in historic. So, even if you pull these cards in the draft, you can play them in the draft, but they will not essentially be playable in Historic. So, or they might do the thing like they did with Jumpstart, where they're probably going to replace these cards with other cards, essentially, at least regarding to Arena Draft. So, keep that in mind. One other thing. Also, if you by any chance pick up a Japanese booster, or essentially you can get one in within the collector boosters, in the Japanese packs, they actually are going to have alternate arts for their essentially mystical archive cards. And as we can see here, like for example, Sword of Plowshares, you can get this one in the Japanese booster pack, or even as a one of in your collector booster, which some of these, the art are legit gorgeous. Like Sword of Plowshares one's really good, Opt is amazing, and even there's one for Demonic Tutor, which, wow. So yeah, it'll be definitely fascinating to both see this set get spoiled as well as this. And then we also see the extended art of the commands that we just talked about. So that's what we've seen so far of Strixhaven. Like I said, it's a bit of a teaser. Like if we go back to here, the only thing else we see is just like the full map, which I'll link the article in the video down below. It's actually kind of a fun read. Oh wait, one more thing. As mentioned before, there is also the commander stuff, so keep that in mind. It's going to be each of each college. And they did show off the packaging, which I guess my last prediction of probably why they did this whole teaser theme. It's probably just so they provide the packaging art for suppliers and such in retail stores so they can actually start selling the product on their online stuff. So that's probably the reason. So we get to see the main package for the booster bots, aka the draft booster, which, as we can see, there's some very popular characters, aka Will and Rowan, are coming back in Strixhaven, which is nice to see. We see all the schools on the booster packs. We see what the set booster is, which is actually kind of some nice art. It'll be kind of like interesting to see the implications of that art. And then we get the theme booster stuff, which is actually just nice to see. Kind of like they're going variety of kind of like the diversity of the set and such, of character designs and such, which is really nice to see. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about one of the main things that people were talking about with these theme boosters, which is, well, if I can zoom into this properly, pretty much if we're talking about the with a room theme booster, well, bear, 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 bear. Yeah, everybody's talking about this bear character. They're really excited to see what this bear character is and hope it's like a legendary creature and such. Like, if that's the one thing I've been seeing on Twitter, they are constantly talking about this bear. Then we see the bundle pack, as well as we get a little bit more details on the Mystical Archive. Like I said, I'll link the article down below. And I think that's everything from Strixhaven they spoiled so far. So, I am going to talk a little bit about Kaldheim Standard in another video, as well as essentially try to get the new Brewing Labs out as soon as I can. I hope you all enjoyed this kind of like a live vlog, kind of like my 2 cents on Strixhaven's, pretty much the teaser and such. So far, I'm excited for this set. It definitely looks like they are doing really good with the thematics and world design of this set, and it'd be very fascinating kind of like see how they, due to the fact that we know that essentially it's going to be different schools and such, especially within the kind of like Dragons of Tarkir kind of like premise in a sense, it'll be very interesting to see what the MDFC cards are within this. So, nevertheless, I hope you all have a lovely day. This is LevDev, signing out. Bada beep, bada boop.